Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. Totally my fault, totally a glitch. I'm thrilled to have Jill McCorkle here to talk about her amazing book, Old Crimes. I'm going to quickly go through the introduction so we can talk to Jill again. And if you have questions, put them in the chat. Don't forget to buy Jill's books at bookshop.org or your favorite indie bookstore. Jill McCorkle has the distinction of having published first two novels, The Cheerleader on July 7th on the same day in 1984. She's the author of Hieroglyphics and 5 collections of short stories, including Old Crimes. Her books have been named New York Times Notable Books, Best American Short Stories. She's received the New England Booksellers Award, the John Dos Paso Prize for Excellence, the North Carolina Award for Literature. She's received prizes for just about everything. Her work has been praised by Booklist, and a starred review said, gorgeous. Each story is powerful individually. From Jenny Offill, author of Weather, a splendid wide-ranging collection. Alexander Chi said, extraordinary ear for the music of ordinary life. And Lily King said, wry humor, deep understanding, and a tremendous sense of fun. So, Jill, welcome again. Hopefully this is being recorded, I hope. I'm thrilled to have you here. And since our first 3 questions got cut off, I'm going to start with some newer questions.
Okay.
So I was very interested in how, well, actually, I'm going to repeat a question. I was very interested in how all of these stories really seem as if they could be novels. And it had struck me that you don't just go through one person's point of view, the person who's telling the story. It seems like in each story, you're very aware of everyone's point of view. So I would love to know if you can comment on that, because you seem to have such a great interest in what everybody is thinking and feeling and perceiving, and how one difference of opinion will bounce up against another person's.
Thanks. Yeah, even when the point of view is limited to one character, I have a great fear of slipping into what might be a stereotypical character. And I think oftentimes in that first draft, it's very easy to just plug characters in, because we do have in mind a particular type
Right.
situation often. But then the challenge is to go back and find ways to sort of push the pieces so that there is that appearance of the complexity that every life has. So I'm always aware of trying to create the illusion that, if it's an illusion, or the reality maybe is better, of a whole life behind this character, so it's not just someone plugged in.
That's why the stories often seem like novels to me, because it's like you ended the story, and I believe that the reader still wants to know, where are these people now? Are they okay? And it's that thing, are they okay? Because you've made us care about their dilemma and think about it. There's so much in this book, too, about regret. And you had mentioned before in our original talk that didn't get recorded properly, that there's such a thing as a good regret. I'd love for you to talk about that a little, because I think that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I was saying, I mean, it still lingers as a regret, but I was saying I think a good regret might be the kind that teaches us something important for the rest of life, or that makes us suddenly aware of something we didn't know and recognize at the time. I mean, I think everyone has had that experience with a parent, especially. You look back at your
Right.
parents' lives and you suddenly go, oh wow, that was so hard. Or there was, and you see them at a different angle,
Right.
and there is a kind of regret that you didn't know it then because you might have done something differently. Or I remember, the story personally that has come back to me many times. I was in a not so happy situation. Now, 20 years ago, and I was teaching at a summer event, and it was one of those just perfect afternoons. The sunlight, it looked like a movie, and all these people at beautiful tables, and there was a writer who was the visiting writer, and he was so impressive, and brilliant and kind, and his wife was with him. And I remember sitting there watching them, and all of a sudden I thought, that is what it's supposed to look like. And it was kind of like, if it had been the movie, we would have just frozen in the moment. And I thought, I really think I want to write him a letter and just tell him how beautiful that was to me, and what an illuminating moment to see. And then before I wrote that letter, he had died.
Oh no.
And
Oh no.
I thought, well, I will write her. And she died. So I learned, you know, when you feel compelled to
Do it.
tell someone, tell them, tell them what a difference they have made, or an impact. Um, so it's one of those. I was saying in our earlier show, a lot of these regrets are things not done. You
Not
know,
done. That's right.
all those things we do in our head. You're going to sleep. You're having this conversation, and time or busyness steals it. So
That's incredible. I read somewhere that you do not like revision, that in fact you sometimes hate it. So, how do you do it then if you hate it? How do you
you
approach
know,
it?
I actually do like revision.
Oh, you do? Oh, then somebody misquoted you.
But somebody must have misquoted. I mean, I often say, well, probably what got misquoted is I often say revision is the real work,
Right,
meaning,
maybe that's what.
meaning, for me, the real stuff, because what's in the first draft is, I sort of pull in everything and the kitchen sink, in that first, because I just always think, oh, well, I may need this. It's like for the trip where you have 3 steamer trunks, and then they tell you, no, you got to get it down to a backpack and a carry-on. And so I love revision in that way, because
Oh,
it's such a challenge. And you know, it oftentimes you have way too much. I mean, I'm sure you've had this happen where it just splits and you think, oh no, I have two I'm working on.
I wonder if you could talk about one of my favorite stories in the collection was the confessional, the one about the confessional. Could you talk about that story a little bit? I just loved it.
Yeah, and that is a story that's just purely idea driven. This young couple buys an antique confessional booth. And it all started because I one day, scrolling through eBay, God knows what I was looking for or at, and I saw a confessional booth on eBay. And of course, it was thousands of dollars and beautiful. But
Oh, wouldn't you love to have that?
yeah, yeah. So I was thinking, this couple, they see it and they think, oh, how fun this will be. And of course, eek. Um, it's my version of Pandora's box,
Right, right, right.
and what you cannot take back once the knowledge is out there.
You once said that figuring out who you are in relationship to your mother is one of the keys of life. But I also wanted to know, would you say that figuring out who you are in relationship to your child is another?
Mhm.
I mean, there's something about those very changing relationships for both the parent and the child.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And in fact, I mean, earlier you showed, Ferris Beach, which is a novel of, um, that's the example I always use because I wrote the draft of that novel. Um, I finished it and I was pregnant with my daughter. And then I came back to revise after she was born.
Oh my goodness.
And so for me, it was this dramatic shift of having been totally with the kid in the rough draft. And I kept thinking, this mother is just flat, one dimensional. What can I do? I got to give her something. She's just no pulse. And when I circled back, it was like somebody had just flipped the track, and I was seeing this mother with brand new eyes.
You do. You do. It's always, my mother always used to say, wait until you're a mother and you'll see what it's like. I used to say, yeah, 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 yeah. And now that I'm a mother of an adult son, you start to understand why your own parent acted the way they did and how you can perhaps act differently. But I just thought that was a very profound thing to say. I also understand that you're a moviegoer, that you're a movie holic, that you love movies.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Twilight Zone encyclopedia.
Well, it is loaded. Um, I love every New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, they do the marathon. And I always just get sucked right in. I mean, we all have our favorites, but they're the really scary ones, but they're also the really sweet, sentimental ones,
Right.
that I love. I mean, I just think he was a really brilliant, good-hearted man.
He was, and originally, I believe it was the networks did not want him to be doing plays like Requiem for a Heavyweight, which is a very serious drama, and he thought to get his ideas out, he could couch it in, sci-fi or fantasies or whatever else was going on, and he did it so beautifully. There's actually this wonderful book. I got to know the author, his daughter Anne.
Uh-huh.
I think she wrote Rod Serling as I Know Him. I believe that's the title.
I
But
have that. I have
yeah, it's great. It's absolutely great. We have two questions for you. This is great. From Marissa Coots, thank you. My inquiry is about a different book. Jill's Life After Life was published in the United States in March 2013. About 10 weeks later in the UK, Kate Atkinson's Life After Life was published. I'm curious, wait, come on, show that. I'm curious about Jill's thoughts, reactions at the same time. Did you have a heads up about the same titles? Titles can't be copywritten. That happens a
Oh,
lot.
no, but I mean, I think probably both publishers would be in agreement that somebody dropped the ball
Yeah,
because in the US her book came out pretty much the same week. We because you know how they do the indie
right. The
thing,
Indie Next List,
they
right.
split it. They did both of our books for that indie next. And I remember at the time I looked at my editor and I said, bless that independent bookseller who said, "You cannot do this to her. Stick her in there with Kate Atkinson." Um, it was kind of devastating because I had had the title for years and
Yeah.
periodically would check, and the only book of that title was the nonfiction, near death experience. And so it was a total shock. I mean, the the one thing I keep thinking is that it may be a lot of people bought me by mistake.
I don't think so.
He sells very well.
It's terrible when when things like that happen, and they do happen. So I also read in an interview where you said that you always like to have another project percolating while you're in the midst of one. Do you have something else going on now that you're writing about it? Can you talk about it, or would you rather not? Which is fine.
Well, I'm kind of superstitious about discussing the thing,
Right.
but I do have a novel started. I mean, it's an idea that I've had for a while. Um, I don't know how you feel. I often feel I get ideas. I'm just not ready to write. One of the
Right.
stories in this collection, Filling Station, I had the idea. Um, I had the idea 20 years ago for that character, but I could never figure out his his story. So
Yeah.
same with novels.
Yeah, sometimes you have to have more life experiences. It's true. It's like a novel sometimes has to marinate the idea before it all comes to fruition. Um,
I
I
want to
wonder,
thank Marissa. She's getting the
oh
love.
yeah, she said her signed hardcover of Jill's
Thank
Very Blue Life
that,
After Life
Marissa.
is Still on My Bedside. Huge thank you, Jill. Let's put that up so everybody else can see that.
Thank you.
That's lovely. That's totally lovely. So, do your students influence you or your writing at all?
Yes, they do. I mean, I feel like they really keep me on my toes. And
Do
you
you
know,
find the generation, the way they approach writing and reading different?
um, yeah, it sort of comes and goes in different waves. I mean, clearly the classroom has changed a
Yeah.
great deal from what you can easily say and what you can't. And I was in college in the in the 70s where people were smoking in class and just
And
sort of
saying whatever they wanted.
saying anything, and the professors too. So I keep thinking about that. I mean, it is so funny that to be this many years in the future, and
It's very strange. And speaking of different things, you actually did your own Audible recording for your book. What was that like? I mean,
oh,
I can't
listen,
imagine.
I've tried out like 3 times and didn't
Oh,
get the job. I've always wanted to read, and because of the stories I got to read to this time.
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Did you find that when you were reading it? I mean, maybe this is just a writerly thing. Whenever I read out loud, I always want to change some of the words. As you were reading, did you have that inclination, like, oh, you just want to beef up this sentence, or were you able to be totally loyal to the text?
No, there you hit that sentence where you realize the intonation needs to be different. And so the good thing is they record it and they let you you can redo it.
Oh,
It
that's
was
great.
it was fascinating to me because they do hire actors, to do this. And so it was a fun experience because the one story, Act 3, where the mother is the narrator is remembering um, their childhood when they're playing freeze tag, and there's this moment when she's remembering their voices saying freeze, but she's also remembering where she was, and then there's just that single word freeze, and I read it kind of quickly, and the person who was coaching me stopped and said, no, no, that word means more than freeze, what the kids are doing in the yard. You need to say it. She wants everything to freeze. and it was just really moving,
That's
to
so
have,
interesting.
yeah, and it made a difference. I mean, it really,
That's so interesting. It's like having a verbal editor in a way, like
yeah.
telling you how to get the most of the line. That's so interesting. You have another question. This is so great. This is from Stacy Resnikoff.
Oh,
You're
I know Stacy Resnikoff.
you're so good at the mood of a place or setting. What do you do or review to present place so well?
Uh, um, thank you for that. I love, um, I love describing a place. I often feel like the place becomes its own kind of character. And I think it's what is it? The Capote's opening of Breakfast at Tiffany's. I'm always drawn back to places where I lived
Right.
and this beautiful description. And I've always found that so moving because I sometimes my best greatest inspiration comes from those places of the past. And so I often steal from my own life, like I will put someone in my grandmother's kitchen. They have nothing to do with my grandmother.
They do now.
But suddenly I know where everything is in that kitchen. And I know what it feels like and smells like. And so I use places of my own life. Um, so that's probably what's bleeding through. I think anytime we um, are dealing with something from real life, it just automatically brings that up
Right.
right.
Well, it has an emotional context. And as soon as you put an emotion into a place, it just expands in meaning. So I wanted to ask you also, what's the worst advice you've ever gotten in your career as a writer? And what's the best advice anyone's given you?
Oh gosh. I can think of the best advice. What would the worst advice be? I don't know. I mean, probably I don't know if it was given to me directly, just this kind of attitude of agony because I've never felt that way about it. Um, to me, it's always felt like kind of a luxury, even though
Yeah,
it can be very hard. I've always, I sort of run to it and feel like it's a guilty secret. I almost feel um, sometimes I have felt guilty, that I could be in this room all by myself having such
it's a wonderful, it's the best job in the world. Totally is.
but along that track, the best advice I ever got, well, there are a lot of things, but the writer George Garrett came to a class I was taking in grad school, and he said, "Whoever it is who breathes down your neck and criticizes you and questions the way you say something or see something, get them the hell out of your room and lock the door." And so it gave me this idea of, when you sit down to write, you do it pretending that maybe nobody will ever even see it. You know, it would be like um, get as close to the kind of reverie that's going on in your
Right.
mind 24/7 anyway. I mean, we wouldn't want people reading our minds. And
No.
I always think of kids, playing and how funny they look when you catch them. Like if you walk up on a kid who's just,
Right.
engaged in conversation and in the middle of a story and they suddenly stop. And that's how I feel as a writer. And I think we all need to um I think on a good writing day, that's exactly what we're doing. We're like those kids in the yard, with the beach towel pine cones head or whatever. and and so giving yourself permission
Right.
get rid of anyone who criticizes edits, even though there's a place for that editing and the critique. Not in that first draft.
What's obsessing you now and why?
Oh, what is obsessing me now? Well, I'm worried about where the world is
Right.
going. And it really pushes me more and more to pay attention to those everyday objects, chores, sightings that are so easily taken for granted.
You're talking about staying in the moment, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's with a lot of your writing. You will take the one detail that seems slight, and yet it becomes a whole world, because of its importance to the character. We have a few minutes left, and I would love it if you wouldn't mind reading a page or two.
Sure.
Oh, wonderful! Oh, I'm so glad.
Do you have a suggestion or?
Nope. I want you to read whatever you want to read.
Well, I think I will read. Well, I could read the opening of Low Tones.
That's great.
Which I haven't done. If I can find it.
Or, you can read the first page of the collection. It's also wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that, you know what? Why don't I just, there's a piece from Lineman. I think I'll do that.
Okay, great.
And the only setup, and this I think goes along with the question you just asked about what I worry about, because I worry about our lives becoming so fragmented, and the lack of attention, the lack of focus, the lack of anticipation of what's up ahead, like how exciting it used to be when you knew the Wizard of Oz was coming in 3 weeks. And if you missed it, or heaven forbid, if you went to the bathroom when the flying monkeys came, you had to wait another year. Yeah.
Right.
and so my character in The Lineman is musing a lot about how our society has changed communication wise. And so all you need to know about this guy is he's going through a difficult divorce. And at one end of his life, he's got a teenage daughter he's trying to remain in close touch with. And at the other end, a mother with dementia, and he's losing her as well. So, and in between, he ruminates about our communication. Did I say how there used to be silence? And now I'm wondering what people are going to do when the big blow comes, when all the lines are knocked out and the generators fail and we're returned back to a day guided by nothing but the sun and the moon. Do you know how to read a clock face? Have you memorized addresses and phone numbers? Do you know how to read a map? I ask Amanda, who sometimes listens, but most times doesn't. I say how it used to be a person actually had to get up and walk to one place in the house to answer the phone, that it was tethered there to the wall with cords and a plug that slid neatly into a jack that people like me came and installed. You had to get up off your ass to change the channel too. Sometimes you had to put tinfoil on rabbit ears and twist your body this way and that to pick up one of the 3 channels available in our area. The phone was a separate entity itself, a station, a fixture, not an appendage to interrupt you 10 million times a day. My old mama had a chair built into a little table that was just for the telephone, and you had a dictionary on the shelf to look up something you didn't know. People had things like World Book. My old mama didn't have anything but Funk and Wagnalls, and I was jealous of the World Book crowd. First thing I did as a married man with a baby coming was to go out and buy a set. And Pam, who had just started taking classes at the university, looked at me like I was a fool. Of course you got a good buy, she yelled. Amanda, who we just called the baby at the time, filling her abdomen. It's like buying dinosaur food. Where have you been, Ricky? That was when she still called me Ricky, which I'd been called my whole life. It was right before she got it in her head that I might fit in better if we called me Rick or even Rich or Richard. But my name isn't Richard, I told her. It's Ricky. On my birth certificate, it says Ricky. And don't ask me why my mama chose to go with Ricky. For all I know, it was because of Ricky Damn Ricardo, but that's just the way it is. Maybe somewhere out there is a guy named Ricky who fathered me, but that's something I'll probably never hear about. And then he skips on. I'll skip a little, but it's now I tell Amanda that she needs to learn how to wait and be patient, be still and know. Somebody famous said that, and if I still had my World Books, I might be able to say who. Be still and know. Or maybe it's from the Bible. Pretty sure it's either Walt Whitman, Confucius, or God. I don't Google, so you'll just have to take my word for it. There was a time we had a turntable with speakers the size of small coffins. We had one phone in the kitchen and an extension in the bedroom and only had to dial 5 digits. I grew up with 5 digits and we didn't go to 7 until I was in high school. The rotary made a nice sound and allowed time to concentrate between numbers, like the sound at the end of an album before the needle is lifted. There was a time when we had silence. It was so quiet, you could hear what someone said.
That's so wonderful. That's so, so wonderful. The thing I love the best about that is your reading is so exceptional. It just sounds like the character is right there across from you, talking to you and telling you. I want to thank you so much for being here, Jill. I want to thank everybody for being here. I apologize about although we got a late start. Totally my fault.
Well, hey, speaking of technology,
right, that's right.
I'm the technology jinx, I believe. So I take credit for it.
And also, by the way, Marissa said that reading was gorgeous. I agree. I agree. It was absolutely wonderful. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for these great questions and your patience with the technology. And we'll see you all next week. And Jill, you just hang on for a second. Okay. So goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.